Broncos country, welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest edition of Broncos Now. I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and the Broncos hit the road today to head to Buffalo. Less than 24 hours now until the team is back in action as they are set to take on the Buffalo Bills on Saturday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Head coach Nathaniel Hackett announced that quarterback Josh Johnson will be the starter again this Saturday. He said that both Josh and Brett Rippon have done a great job, but there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, both guys have done really good. Josh, I think, had a really good game the other night. Wasn't too big for him. I think he's come out here and he's done a good job. Had a couple things, that he needs to improve on, but it's everybody. Everybody has to improve. I do. Those guys do. And you just want to keep watching those guys battle and have a healthy competition because Rip's done a good job. The idea is who can we get the most consistent? We want to be sure that we're not turning the ball over. We're making smart decisions and moving the chains.
Offensive coordinator Justin Allen also gave his thoughts on Josh and what his expectations are for him this weekend.
Johnson did a really good job. From practice to the game, he expedited everything with his feet, his progressions, putting people in the right spots, being accurate, throwing the ball down the field, protection adjustments. I was very pleased with Josh. As far as this week, just to stack it, just to do another week just like we did last week with him, and we'll see how it plays out.
Looking back at the Broncos' first preseason game versus the Cowboys, defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero was impressed with the defense's performance, and here's why.
It did well. The biggest thing is the speed of the game. Obviously, these guys are out here flying around in practice and all that stuff, but you can't replicate that intensity, that speed, and really even for the guys that make the team, when they get to the regular season, it's going to be even faster. And so, but just kind of getting the feel for the NFL, the speed, the in-game action, and going through that.
A couple of young receivers were also praised for their performance in last weekend's preseason game. Montrell Washington and Brandon Johnson. Listen to what Coach Hackett, Justin Allen, and special teams coordinator Dwayne Stukes had to say about those guys.
Yeah, for how much we throw at these guys, all these young guys have done an incredible job. Zach Azzani's done a great job getting them ready, meeting with them as much as he possibly can, and to see him come out there and make some plays in the game, and even today. I think he had one from Russ today, which was really great, but you just want to see those guys continue to develop and know what to do first. That's what always my concern with a young guy, because there's so much that they're getting, and he's got that down, which is great. And now he just gets to go out there and make plays.
He's doing all the things necessary to put himself in really good places. Working with the ones, he earned that opportunity. He does the things behind the scenes that put him in a really good spot, and it's just working what's expected from us as coaches and what's expected by Russell, and he's been doing a really good job in all aspects, not just the pass game, but in the run game too.
I thought Montrell did a great job. He did a great job decision-making. I thought he did a great job as far as catching the ball and being decisive and getting up the field vertically as quick as possible. And to be completely honest with you, I thought the guys, since they believe in him, they did a good job blocking for him as well.
Now joining me here in the Broncos podcast studio is Broncos lead writer Eric Talala. Eric, another preseason game is already here. The weeks just keep flying by.
This one did go quickly, yeah.
It did. I'm itching for the regular season already.
Man, those weeks really fly by.
They really do. Well, with the game being tomorrow, kind of just what are your expectations for this team? As we've discussed many times on the podcast already, head coach Nathaniel Hackett doesn't like the preseason, likes that risk-reward mindset when playing starters. So just want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for the guys that will play. Let's start there, that I don't expect a lot of the starters to play, and we can maybe get there in a second, but there are going to be a lot of guys that get playing time that need this playing time. And I see it as kind of two groups of players almost. There's that group that is competing for either a starting spot or, significant snaps, significant minutes on this football team. I'm talking about guys like Baron Browning, Calvin Anderson, those sorts of players. And then you've got kind of that next tier of players that they're just simply trying to stay on the team. They're trying to earn a roster spot when it gets to the 53-man deadline. And so that could be an undrafted player like a Brandon Johnson. That could be, maybe it's a rookie safety like Delarian Turner-Yell. Just trying to find a spot on this team. And so two very different kind of mindsets and goals, but both very important. And especially defensively, Sydney, this team is going to get a real test because Josh Allen is expected to play. Right. The Bills starters are expected to see some time. So if you're a PJ Locke or a Caden Stearns, or you're a Damari Mathis or a Michael Ojemudia, you're going to get tested. This is going to be like you're playing a regular season football game against the best offense potentially in the entire NFL, potentially the best quarterback.
Right.
And so that's going to be a real challenge, real good evaluation. Because if you're George Payton and you're looking at tape and you see, let's pick anybody, Luke Wattenberg, a guy we talked about yesterday,
Right.
he's going against a third string defensive lineman. I think it's hard to tell.
It's hard to evaluate.
Yeah, what does that mean? If he plays really well, how would he do against a top flight guy? And so, if the Broncos offense gets to go against Von Miller or Gregory Rousseau or some of these, top guys in the back end of their defense, that's going to be a really good test and show you not just, how do these guys play, but you have a great barometer there, because you can say, okay, well, this is what, Damari Mathis did against Stephon Diggs, or this is what PJ Locke did when Josh Allen tried to look him off on a play. So that to me is the most important thing, is you're going to get a great evaluation. It might not be fair. The Broncos might not win necessarily,
Right.
but you're going to get to see them against as good a team as you'll see potentially. The Broncos won't play them in the regular season, but
Right.
as good a team as they could see all year.
Absolutely. And preseason doesn't matter if you win.
That's true.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, we probably won't see a ton of starters, but we did see a couple in last week's preseason game. So if any, what starters do you think will play?
Yeah, I kind of tried to get that out of Nathaniel Hackett yesterday. I asked him, hey, any guys that didn't play against Dallas, are they going to play in Buffalo? He said he hadn't decided yet. I'm going to guess, Sydney, that anybody that didn't play against against Dallas, I'm guessing they won't play again this week. I don't think you're going to see like a Garrett Bowles out there or a Josie Jewell or a Ronald Darby. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the value that you get from that, to me, doesn't make up for, again, the risk reward. It doesn't make up for what could potentially happen. The bigger question is, like, does Albert O play again? I think he probably will play some more. I think it'll be valuable, especially for him, if he has to block a Vaughn or a Gregory Rousseau. Right. He had a little bit of trouble blocking last week against Dallas, so this could be a good opportunity to show, hey, I've taken a step forward, or I'm going to rebound here. So he's a guy I could see playing. Obviously Calvin Anderson, Cam Fleming, those guys have been kind of working in at that right tackle spot.
Yeah.
I would think you could see both of those players, because they're still trying to prove that they can start. So that's not a competition that's over. And then defensively, I know Jonas Griffith played. Obviously, he's hurt. I'm missing who was the fourth guy that played? I'm missing it. I think that those are probably
either.
Yeah, I think Malik Reed. He's a guy that I think could also continue to play, just because he's kind of in that position battle type situation where Baron Browning, Nick Bonito are also pushing for the right to be the third edge rusher, and so he's a guy we could see out there for a little bit, but. I would guess the Broncos' plan is almost exactly the same, because you see some teams ramp it up in the preseason, like you do a little bit week 1, you do a little bit more week 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the Broncos have any sort of ramp up plan, and so not to say there's not a plan. It's just they're not worried about the starters in that standpoint.
Right.
So I would think the reps would be very similar to last week.
That makes sense. Well, to focus a little bit more on the rookies now, Eric, we heard from Coach Hackett and the coordinators earlier in the show. A lot of them praised both Montrell Washington and Brandon Johnson, who obviously have had a really great week last week against the Cowboys. What other rookies are you going to be watching for tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Brandon Johnson is a guy that's got to continue to show up.
Yeah.
He had those positive plays against the Cowboys. He also had in joint practice a ball go through his hands that was picked off. That's something that if you do that multiple times, Russ is probably going to think twice before he throws you the football.
Right.
He had a couple, I think, drops or, passes that weren't completed. Hard to assign blame in a game, but a couple of those against the Cowboys. So I was impressed this week how he rebounded from that, had a couple of nice catches at times. Saw him make a really deep contested catch at one point during a practice. And so I just want to see him continue to build off that. And, it's all about consistency. Can he continue to make big plays without making the bad ones? Because a coach would rather have, I think, especially hearing from Coach Hackett, a player who's at like a B level all the time, as opposed to a guy that fluctuates between an A level and a C level or a D level. So that's what I'll look for from him. And then to answer your actual question, Matt Henningsen along the defensive line, he had a couple of good pressures, I thought, against the Cowboys. he's right in that mix, I think, to make the roster potentially. I mean, you've got obviously the 3 starters in the Joneses and Deshaun Williams. Then you've got Mike Purcell and Yomo Wazirike. Then you've got a bunch of guys that I think are competing for the 6th and final defensive line spot. You're talking about a McTelvin Agim. You're talking about a Jonathan Harris. And Matt Henningsen's in that group as well. And so he's got to continue to have a strong preseason to show that he deserves that roster spot. Started off well against the Cowboys. I'll have my eye on him again.
Well, teams are required to trim down their rosters again next week on Tuesday, down to 80 guys. So who do you really think needs to show up tomorrow and really try and secure their spot on this roster?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because this is the last mini cut before the big one. I obviously don't want to single guys out here because I just don't know. I never would have guessed that Jamar Johnson and Travis Fulgham would have been let go in that initial wave. What I will say is that if you're a receiver right now, they're not going to keep all 4 of those guys that I kind of consider to be battling for those positions. And it's really 5 because we heard Dwayne Stukes talk about the fact that they still want Tyree Cleveland on this roster. So between him, Kendall Hinton, Brandon Johnson, Seth Williams, Jalen Virgil, you've got a lot of guys that, it's probably going to be 2 spots. And if you count Tyree, maybe there's only 1 left for the rest of those guys. And so it doesn't matter it matters what you did against the Cowboys, but you've got to go out now and do it again. And so if you're Kendall Hinton, if you're Jalen Virgil, Brandon Johnson, Seth Williams, you got to go have another good game, continue to stack good performances because right now that's going to be one of the toughest positions to make on this roster.
Well, less than 24 hours until kickoff, so should be a fun one tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Eric, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sid.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Broncos Country, thanks so much for joining me here inside the UC Health Training Center for another edition of Broncos Now. Don't forget, kickoff on Saturday is at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for another edition on Monday.